They deliberately slept on cold floors, ate stale bread, and walked barefoot in winter. They voluntarily gave up comfort, pleasure, and luxury for days at a time. They intentionally put themselves through physical and mental hardship that would make modern people think they were insane. But the ancient Stoics weren't masochists or religious fanatics seeking salvation through pain. They were practicing the most sophisticated form of psychological training ever developed: voluntary discomfort that created invincible mental strength. What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you think you know about comfort, resilience, and human potential. If you're ready to discover why the strongest minds in history deliberately chose to suffer and how this forbidden practice can make you mentally unbreakable, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who's been weakened by too much comfort. Comment below what comfort you've been using to avoid growth, and subscribe to this channel for the dangerous wisdom that builds real character. Here's the truth that will disturb you. Comfort is making you weak, and the Stoics knew it. Every convenience you can't live without, every comfort you consider essential, every luxury you think you deserve, is slowly destroying your ability to handle difficulty. The ancient philosophers understood something that modern society desperately wants to hide from you. Voluntary hardship creates involuntary strength. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly practiced poverty. Marcus Aurelius, who could have lived in ultimate luxury, chose deliberate discomfort. Epictetus, who knew real suffering as a slave, taught others to choose temporary difficulty to avoid permanent weakness. Let me tell you about James, a successful tech executive who discovered this practice during the pandemic. While everyone else was making their homes more comfortable, buying better furniture, upgrading their entertainment systems, James began deliberately making his life harder. He started sleeping on the floor one night a week. He took cold showers exclusively. He ate simple meals without seasoning. He walked everywhere instead of driving. His friends thought he had lost his mind, but something remarkable happened. When real difficulties hit, when his company faced layoffs, when his relationship ended, when his father was diagnosed with cancer, James remained unshakable while others crumbled. This is what the Stoics called voluntary discomfort, and it's based on a principle so powerful it was kept secret from the masses. You cannot develop strength without resistance, resilience without adversity, or mental toughness without deliberately choosing difficulty. But here's the crucial difference between Stoic training and pointless suffering. Every hardship was chosen strategically to build specific capacities. They weren't suffering randomly, they were training systematically. The first form of voluntary discomfort was material poverty practice. Seneca, despite his enormous wealth, would regularly spend days eating nothing but bread and water, sleeping on hard surfaces, wearing rough clothing. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" But this wasn't about guilt or shame regarding wealth. This was about building immunity to material loss. Sarah, a marketing director addicted to luxury lifestyle, began practicing voluntary poverty after reading Seneca's letters. One weekend per month, she ate only rice and beans, slept without her expensive mattress, wore old clothes, and avoided all entertainment spending. The first time was miserable, but by the 6th month, something profound had changed. Her anxiety about money disappeared completely. Her fear of job loss evaporated. Her need for status symbols vanished. When she eventually did face a layoff, she felt prepared rather than panicked because she had already proven to herself that she could be happy with almost nothing. The second practice was physical discomfort training. The Stoics deliberately exposed themselves to cold, heat, hunger, and fatigue, not to punish themselves, but to expand their comfort zones systematically. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I have to go to work, as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do?'" But he wasn't just talking about mental attitude. He practiced physical hardship to build mental resilience. David, a software developer who had become soft from years of desk work and modern conveniences, discovered this approach during a personal crisis. He began deliberately choosing discomfort: cold showers, uncomfortable seating, walking in bad weather. skipping meals occasionally, exercising when he didn't feel like it. Initially, it was torture, but gradually he noticed something remarkable. Problems that used to overwhelm him became manageable. Stress that used to paralyze him became energizing. Difficulties that used to defeat him became challenges he welcomed. The third form was social discomfort practice. The Stoics deliberately put themselves in situations that would be embarrassing, awkward, or socially challenging. Cato the Younger famously walked through Rome barefoot and without a tunic, not from poverty, but to build immunity to social judgment. Epictetus taught his students to act in ways that would invite criticism or ridicule, specifically to develop independence from others' opinions. Rachel, a perfectionist paralyzed by fear of judgment, began practicing deliberate social discomfort after studying Stoic texts. She intentionally wore mismatched clothes to work. She asked obviously simple questions in meetings. She expressed unpopular opinions in social situations. She made small mistakes on purpose just to practice handling embarrassment. The results were revolutionary. Her fear of judgment dissolved. Her need for approval vanished. Her authentic self emerged because she had systematically desensitized herself to social discomfort. But here's what separates this from mere self-torture. Every practice was designed with specific psychological outcomes. The Stoics weren't suffering for its own sake. They were building what they called the citadel of the soul, an inner fortress that external circumstances could never breach. Voluntary discomfort serves three crucial functions that comfort can never provide. First, it reveals what you actually need versus what you think you need. Jake, a corporate lawyer trapped by golden handcuffs, discovered this during his first month of voluntary poverty practice. When he stripped away restaurant meals, entertainment subscriptions, luxury purchases, and convenience services, he expected misery. Instead, he found clarity. He realized that 90% of his expenses were feeding insecurities and filling emotional voids rather than meeting genuine needs. This realization gave him the courage to leave corporate law for public service, taking a 60% pay cut but gaining immeasurable life satisfaction. Second, voluntary discomfort builds what psychologists now call stress inoculation. Just as vaccines expose you to small amounts of disease to build immunity, chosen hardship exposes you to manageable difficulty to build resilience. Adam, a small business owner who had been devastated by every minor setback, began practicing systematic discomfort training. He deliberately took on challenging projects, sought out difficult conversations, and put himself in uncomfortable situations regularly. When real business crises hit, cash flow problems, key employee departures, market downturns, he found himself responding with calm competence rather than panic because his stress tolerance had been systematically expanded. Third, it creates what the Stoics called preferred indifference, the ability to enjoy comfort without being controlled by it. This is the paradox that weak minds cannot grasp. When you can be happy without luxury, luxury becomes truly enjoyable. When you can function without convenience, convenience becomes genuinely appreciated. When you can thrive in discomfort, comfort becomes a gift rather than a necessity. Olivia, a lifestyle blogger whose identity was built around aesthetic perfection and material comfort, experienced this transformation through Stoic practice. She began regularly choosing discomfort, camping instead of hotels, walking instead of ride shares, cooking simple meals instead of ordering delivery. Initially, it felt like deprivation, but gradually she discovered something remarkable. She enjoyed luxury more when she had it because she no longer needed it for happiness. She appreciated beauty more deeply because she had learned to find contentment in simplicity. She became genuinely grateful for comforts that she had previously taken for granted. The fourth practice was emotional discomfort training. The Stoics deliberately exposed themselves to situations that would trigger difficult emotions: anger, fear, sadness, frustration, specifically to build emotional regulation skills. They didn't avoid emotional pain. They sought it out strategically to develop mastery over it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But this power came from practicing with progressively challenging emotional situations. Here's the systematic approach the Stoics use that modern psychology has rediscovered as exposure therapy and stress inoculation training. First, They identified their areas of weakness, what circumstances, people, or challenges consistently disturbed their peace. Second, they created controlled exposures to these triggers, starting small and gradually increasing intensity. Third, they practiced their philosophical principles during these self-imposed difficulties, using real discomfort to strengthen their mental disciplines. But here's the forbidden secret they don't want you to understand. Modern comfort culture is designed to keep you weak, dependent, and controllable. Every convenience that's marketed as making your life better is actually making you more fragile. Every luxury that's sold as necessity is creating new vulnerabilities. Every comfort that's promoted as self-care is reducing your capacity to handle real challenges. When you depend on external conditions for your peace, you become a slave to circumstances. When you require comfort to function, you become vulnerable to any disruption. When you need luxury to be happy, you become trapped by the fear of losing it. The Stoics understood that true freedom comes from needing nothing external for your well-being. And this freedom can only be developed through systematic practice with voluntary hardship. This doesn't mean becoming an ascetic or rejecting all pleasure. The goal isn't to live in permanent discomfort, but to build the capacity to thrive regardless of external conditions. Seneca enjoyed his wealth but wasn't attached to it. Marcus Aurelius appreciated imperial luxury but wasn't dependent on it. Epictetus found contentment in simplicity because he had mastered his responses to circumstances rather than trying to control circumstances themselves. The practical framework is straightforward but not easy. Begin with one area of voluntary discomfort: physical, material, social, or emotional. Start small enough that you can succeed, but challenging enough that you feel resistance. Practice regularly, but not obsessively. The goal is building capacity, not proving toughness. Track your progress not by how much you can endure, but by how little external conditions affect your inner peace. Physical discomfort might mean cold showers, uncomfortable seating, skipping meals occasionally, exercising when you don't feel like it, or sleeping on harder surfaces. Material discomfort could involve voluntary poverty periods, giving up luxury purchases, or deliberately choosing less convenient options. Social discomfort includes expressing unpopular opinions, asking for things you might be denied, or deliberately doing slightly embarrassing things. Emotional discomfort involves seeking out challenging conversations, facing your fears systematically, or putting yourself in situations that trigger difficult emotions. The key insight that transforms this from pointless suffering into powerful training is this: you're not trying to prove you can handle hardship. You're expanding your definition of what's acceptable. Most people have incredibly narrow comfort zones and will go to extreme lengths to avoid even minor discomfort. This makes them prisoners of their circumstances and slaves to their preferences. When you systematically expand what you can handle, what you can enjoy, and what you can find peace within, you become truly free. Not free from difficulty, that's impossible, but free within difficulty. Free to choose your responses rather than being controlled by your reactions. Free to maintain your values regardless of external pressure. Free to be yourself regardless of social judgment. This is why the strongest people in history deliberately chose temporary suffering to avoid permanent weakness. This is why the wisest philosophers voluntarily embraced difficulty to build invincible character. This is why the freest souls systematically practiced discomfort to create unshakable inner peace. They understood that comfort seeks comfort, but strength builds strength. They knew that avoiding all pain creates vulnerability to any pain. They realized that controlling your responses requires practicing with challenging circumstances. Your choice is simple but not easy. You can continue seeking ever greater levels of comfort, convenience, and luxury while your capacity to handle difficulty slowly erodes. You can keep avoiding all discomfort while becoming increasingly fragile and dependent on external conditions for your well-being. Or you can follow the path of the Stoics, deliberately choosing temporary hardship to build permanent strength, voluntarily embracing discomfort to create lasting resilience, strategically practicing difficulty to develop unbreakable character. The choice is yours, and the time is now. Remember, everyone faces involuntary suffering eventually. Life guarantees difficulties that you cannot avoid, challenges that you cannot control, hardships that you cannot prevent. The question is whether you'll face them as someone who has been weakened by constant comfort or strengthened by chosen difficulty. The Stoics chose their suffering so they could choose their responses. They embraced voluntary discomfort so they could maintain voluntary peace. They trained themselves to suffer on purpose so they could live on purpose regardless of circumstances.